talking about perennial propagation, one of the main keys to success is moisture management. This is true for most plant species, but especially so for some of our perennials, which tend to be more sensitive to excess moisture levels. Now, to get your moisture management correct, one of the first steps is to be able to properly identify and communicate substrate moisture. And one of the easiest ways to do that is using the 1 to 5 scale of substrate moisture. If you're unfamiliar with the scale, basically a level 1 is completely bone dry with no free moisture in the substrate, and a level 5 on the opposite end of the scale is completely saturated to the point of dripping out of the bottom of the container. Now, if you're keeping your plants too wet, it's good to know that there's a lot of different things that the plants will do to tell you that they're staying too moist. So let's go over some of the different signs and symptoms. One of the first major signs that we tend to see when the leaves are staying too wet is botrytis or gray mold on the leaves. We tend to see this when there's a lot of excess moisture sitting on the leaves, so it's really important to try and limit that water. Of course, that can be difficult during propagation because we're trying to keep a very humid environment to keep the plants nice and turgid and prevent them from losing too much water. So when you're thinking about your misting, our goal is to increase humidity, but we don't really want that water sitting on the leaves. One opportunity that you can do is to tent your plants to prevent them from staying too wet. Tenting with something like remay can help to allow light to pass through so the plants are getting the light that they need. It can also encourage a little bit more air movement than you would get with tenting material like plastic type of material. So tenting with remay is a really good opportunity to help keep your perennials on the drier side, but still have that nice humid environment. After your plants have rooted, you also want to continue to encourage air movement and try to encourage those wet and dry cycles, allowing your plants to start drying down between irrigations, just to keep things a little bit on the drier side. Also, you can utilize some effective fungicides. Things like Daconil weatherstick are really, really good for being able to prevent botrytis. One of the benefits of a product like Daconil is that with that weatherstick formulation, it doesn't wash off the leaves very easily. So you get that product staying on the leaf even if you're going to be misting for quite a while. When you start to see botrytis coming into your crop, if you've got plug or liners that are sitting out in your greenhouse, you'll tend to see that some of the cuttings will start to die. You'll see your cuttings becoming necrotic very quickly. And so be on the lookout for those symptoms of necrosis in your liners. Another thing that you might notice, especially in some of our silverleaf species like lavender, is that you may see some lack of uniformity in the crop. You may see some plants that are a nice, bright, healthy green, and some plants that are more of like a grayish color, kind of spaced throughout the entire crop. This can be a sign that some plants have rooted well, while some plants still aren't entirely rooted, and that can lead to this lack of uniformity that you see. And when you start off with a lack of uniformity, that's going to follow you through the entire crop cycle. Now, some of the other signs that you may notice associated with excess moisture include things like liverwort and certain insects like shoreflies and fungus gnats. First, let's talk a little bit about liverwort. Liverwort can commonly start to grow on the surface of the substrate when the substrate is being kept too wet and doesn't have an opportunity to dry off. Like I just mentioned a moment ago, it's important to leverage those wet dry cycles, especially after plants have rooted, to try and eliminate this excessively wet substrate condition. Another thing that encourages liverwort growth is excess nutrient levels. So if you are keeping the substrate too wet and you're providing too much fertility, especially in terms of nitrogen and phosphorus, this is when you see things like liverwort start to move in. As I just mentioned, shoreflies are another sign that you may be keeping things too moist. Shoreflies like to feed on the decaying organic matter that's in your substrate. So while they don't really do a lot to actually damage the plant, they are a sign that things are staying a little bit too wet. So be on the lookout for shoreflies. And then fungus gnats. Fungus gnats are similar to shoreflies in that they really thrive in a very wet substrate condition and they feed on some of that organic matter. However, compared to shore flies, fungus gnats actually can cause quite a bit of damage to the crop, feeding on the roots and the base of the stem, as well as leaves that are touching the surface of the substrate. So one of the signs you want to look out for with fungus gnats, if things are staying too wet, you may actually see the larvae on the surface of the substrate, or if you pull out the liner, you may see the fungus gnat larvae somewhere in that substrate profile. And basically what you're looking for is these really small, whitish to kind of clear, translucent, worm-like larvae that have a small black head, like you see in this picture here. So if you see those, that's a sign that things are staying too wet, and you really need to start backing off on your substrate moisture and allowing those dry down cycles to occur. This photo also demonstrates some of the damage that you can see from those fungus gnat larvae when they feed on the lower leaves of the plant. This can happen when the leaves are in contact with the substrate and those larvae come up and will start to actually feed on that tissue. So be on the lookout for those types of signs. While substrate moisture should be your first line of defense against fungus gnats and shore flies, there are some great pesticide options available on the market. University research has demonstrated that safari, distance, and citation are some of the more effective chemistries that are available out there. However, there are a lot of different options that are labeled for fungus gnats and shore flies. Keep in mind that there's also some biological agents that can be used, including some species of predatory rove beetles, uh, predatory mites, and specifically nematodes, which tend to be more effective in helping to control fungus gnat larvae. So utilize those tools, but don't forget that your substrate moisture and the moisture levels in your propagation environment are crucial to getting perennial propagation right.